Hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here with a guest who's going to be talking about experiences with schizotypal personality. So our first question is, what traits of schizotypal personality do you have?
Okay, first of all, thank you for having me here. What traits of schizotypal personality I have? I never feel bored and I am incapable of feeling lonely. I am always in my head, so I think a lot. I don't really talk to people. I'm not really a social person, and I do have unusual beliefs, and I do have paranoia about people. I tend to see more meanings in the small details. Also, I tend to get much more scared by the scary stories or creepy sounds much more than other people.
And thank you so much for that answer. And one question that's sort of related is, would you be willing to describe sort of your internal world to the extent that you're comfortable? So, for example, do you have a really vivid imagination or way of thinking, and what emotions do you feel most strongly?
Actually, an interesting question because I have hyperphantasia, which is, I would say, like a very vivid imagination. I can imagine things very vividly and in great detail. One of the examples for hyperphantasia or aphantasia is how can you see an apple in your head, and I can see it very vividly, or I can change a sound. I can play a song in my head in quite good detail, and I can change the pitch. My visual is better than my sound, I think. Yeah, and it helps me a lot with creative work, but hinders me in a way that I can remember vividly traumatic and bad experiences as well. Also, it makes sense why I would get scared because of this quality of my imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that vividness is probably a double-edged sword in some ways.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. As someone with who's not able to visualize things, it does seem amazing that you're able to recall so much detail in your imagination. The next question is a little bit of a jump in topic, but how are people with schizotypal or just people who are psychiatric patients more generally treated where you live?
So I live in Asia, and it's less. There is a lot more stigma and prejudice towards psychiatric patients, especially considering schizotypal is a rare disorder and mostly dangerous to themselves and to other people. Patients get treated in psychiatric hospitals. So if you want to get treated for your depression or anxiety or something less serious or significant or obvious to other people, you would have to pay for a private psychiatrist, which I do now. Recently, I also got additionally diagnosed with ADHD, and it went unnoticed because it's pretty much unknown in my area. And so, basically, common advice if you struggle with depression, just get the grip. And if you're considered to have a mental disorder, it's considered very stigmatized, and you shouldn't tell that to anyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And speaking of diagnoses, I was kind of wondering what were some of your earliest signs of schizotypal personality disorder, and what led you to ultimately realize that you do have STPD, or what was that diagnostic process like for you?
So earlier signs, I was different since I was a child. I was always a loner. My whole childhood, I was just running around in nature, just counting bunch of rocks or plants or and imagining things. I was always reserved to myself as well, and I was really scared of horror stories. And I had a lot of vivid nightmares and just dreams in general. And it was harder to socialize as well because other kids didn't like me because I was always ruined the fun of scary nice stories because I would get very scared and ask to stop. I was teased a lot, but it wasn't too serious. In my teenage years, I had quite strong social anxiety and often had bodily hallucinations when I was trying to fall asleep. So it's one of those light hallucinations. When I would close my eyes and I was trying to sleep, my body felt lighter, so big, like it just felt big or small. Can you imagine like a nervous system? It's like my body would shrink. And when I open my eyes, I see my body and it doesn't feel weird. But if I close my eyes and I'm trying to fall asleep, well, get this feeling. I used to get this feeling a lot, and I have it still sometimes. That would disturb my sleep, but it wouldn't too bad. It wasn't too bad, and I sincerely thought that other people also had it, but apparently they don't. So that was quite a discovery for me. Um, how I was diagnosed. So it is common for schizotypal patients to seek help for either depression or anxiety because our innate traits are just us. I don't want to get cured of my disorder because it just wouldn't be me. In essence, schizotypal personality disorder is a disorder of personality, which means our type of personality can prevent us from fulfilling our potential or prevent us from succeeding. For example, failing school, losing a job, having difficulty forming friendships, relationships. And while we do not see it as necessarily like a bad thing, if I'm a loner, I just like it that way. But I did had trouble in higher education, even though I was quite successful at school. I had big attendance issues because I just social interactions were just really exhausting for me. Um, so how I was diagnosed at the time, I was failing university because I was in a state of mild psychosis. So I was extremely paranoid, much more than usual. It felt like my roommates were trying to spit in my water, or they were trying to make a plan against me, and I was just withdrawing so much. I was not able to complete my studies, so I was admitted to the hospital. And after I was released, I found out about my diagnosis from just the paper where they prescribe you the meds. So I wasn't even properly explained why, how, but I do remember that during my time in the hospital, I had a lot of conversations with my psychiatrist and long questionnaires, how I perceive things. There were like really long questionnaires. For example, uh, do you feel depressed in the evenings or in the mornings? That sort of thing. But I also had a special questionnaire for me. There were many questions like pick odd one out, and why. And I think this type of questionnaire is trying to detect your your closeness to schizo spectrum. For example, uh, patients with on schizo spectrum, like schizotypal personality disorder or schizophrenia or schizoaffective, they usually have a different logic in this type of tasks. Pick odd one out. For example, if you would say which one a common thing with a boot and a pen, something I would say would be like they both leave a trail, which is not a common answer for a average person, I guess. And I guess all these questionnaires and all these talks led my doctor to put this diagnosis, but I wasn't specifically seeking for it, and I had no idea I had it before I was admitted to the hospital.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And the description you gave of the body hallucinations when you're falling asleep was so interesting, as well as, I guess, describing the diagnostic process and everything leading up to that. Um, the next question kind of, I think you touched on this a little bit when you were talking about how paranoia could create some challenges in university. But may I ask how SUPD has influenced your experiences in school or work more generally?
Yes. So like I said before, I am really a loner. I don't like having small talk with my coworkers. Right now, I'm working a full-time job, and besides it's being tiring, just as it is, it also adds up a layer of tiredness because I have to do small talk, I have to commute, I have to see so many people every day. But I do try to be social enough so it doesn't cause me trouble. But I work in my room alone. I have a rule. I have that type of job that fits me more. So I work alone on with the computers rather than a big room with all the people. I would say they consider me distant and aloof, but I can't really tell you how I see things or how it actually is, because sometimes people say, and I'm worried that said this in good morning to me, and I'm worried that they didn't hear me because I said it too quietly, or maybe too aggressively, or maybe they said it aggressively, and now I'm thinking maybe they don't like me. So this quite confusing, but I think in general I can manage small talk and do the basic minimum, but I do prefer working and studying alone. And in school, I had a big attendance issues. My attendance were probably about 60%. And even though I did in school quite well, it was because I was doing all the work at home and I would come and do my exams and just avoid all other days, basically.
Um, Thank you so much. And is there anything that you especially wish that others understood about STPV?
So I am not public about my diagnosis. So my closest family knows, my friends know, but no coworkers, no other friends. And in all times, before all these medical dictionaries, long codes of illnesses, people like me were just considered eccentric and loners. For example, I have a theory that famous writer Franz Kafka. I relate to him a lot, so sometimes I think maybe he had the same disorder as me. So how other people see it, they can accept it how I am or not. That's up to them. I just enjoy my peace, and I really wish I didn't have to interact with people so much and so daily and so regularly.
Yeah, thank you. Um, and then kind of building off of that, is there any advice that you'd give to clinicians who want to support patients with STPD?
Yes. So, as I said before, most patients with schizotypal personality disorder are fine with themselves. But doctors see it as a unwillingness to learn about it, maybe, or accept the disorder. My doctors didn't spend much time explaining what I have or why I have it. They didn't tell me about the diagnosis at all. They usually just prescribe meds and offer recommendations. Well, this is what psychiatrists do often, but I do wish I could learn more about it rather from the internet, because internet can be truthful and it can a lot of wrong ideas. And for a while, I was really afraid I would develop schizophrenia later on, but it's a common misconception and it's not uh, related to developing schizophrenia. But I wish doctors were more open about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that it is probably challenging to find out that you have a diagnosis through the med prescription and not through kind of more detailed explanation from the doctors. Um, is there any way that STPD has influenced your friendships and relationships more generally?
So I prefer having a couple of very close people, like a partner I talk to daily, and some of my family. But even my old friends, I do keep regular communication, but our breaks between our conversations could last months. And I don't really mind that. If the months come by, weeks, I can talk to them, just nothing happened. We're just friends. So I prefer having a small number of friends. I don't think it affects my relationships in a way that I mind it. For example, a doctor would consider that having so little friends is no good, but it's fine for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that should be the most important thing is if you're satisfied with your friendships, then um, you know, what is there to fix, I guess. Um, the next question is, what do you find the most joy in? So are there sort of intense interests or hobbies or relationships or anything else that you especially enjoy? And are there any aspects or traits of STPD that you particularly enjoy having?
So I would consider myself a creative person. I like making stories and I do like being eccentric or think about interesting theories. I like drawing, making videos, writing, anything that implies creating or changing things. I all of most of these things I do on my computer, so I really like sitting on my front of my computer all day. Uh, so I don't really like going outside, for example. And even at work, I prefer again sitting in the front of the computer and just work. I don't like face-to-face communication, but I enjoy the type of communication that exists between an author and the reader. Something more subtle and ethereal, no words spoken directly, but there is some ideas exchange. And at the same time, you're being individual about these ideas creation. So I really enjoy that type of communication. If I make a video and I see what people think about it, or I write a story and I see what people think about it, or I read about some author stories, I really enjoy this type of internet communication.
Thank you so much. That's fascinating. Um, I think it's really neat that you're able to sort of gain such a vivid insight from the communication of authors and through reading materials. And then on the flip side, is there anything that you find to be the most challenging part of having schizotypal personality?
Yes, I can describe it very well. It's the social discomfort. Even if you're a shut-in like me, and if you don't go outside, you still have to pay for the bills, go to the bank, maintain all the documents, update them, commute to work, commute from back to work, working with people exhausting, going to the any shop, talking to cashiers is exhausting. And sometimes I miss uh so there was a period of my life in that university where I was not going outside at all, and I would always order straight to the door. And even though I was extremely miserable at that time, sometimes I really miss not be being able to never leave my house. And this is somewhat of my dream when I would be able to save up enough money, when I would be able to live with my partner and never ever go outside.
Yeah, thank you. And then lastly, is there anything else that you'd like to add that I'm maybe forgetting to ask?
So STPD is quite rare and there is so little information about it. I do like it that way, and I found our Reddit community quite small, but it's a bunch of eccentric people talking about stuff. Sometimes some people write things that I'm really confused about, but I do relate to quite a lot of things. For example, how people are saying that it really feels like sometimes some people are reading their thoughts because I multilingual, and I remember writing in a bus. Some person was wearing a silly makeup of some sort. I don't really remember, and I thought, what a silly makeup. And then they turned around and glanced at me with such a unnerving glare, and I was so sure they were actually reading my mind. So to calm myself down, I switched the language I was thinking to another language, to I think my native language from English, so I could feel more safe because it's less likely they know the other language as well. And I feel like I wish there were more practical knowledge, like something more scientific, because uh this knowledge can be dangerous if you would treat it by ourselves, kind of, I would say so.
Thank you so much for that answer and for sharing that example about. I think switching languages in your mind is such a creative, I guess, coping mechanism, for lack of a better term, for concern that someone's reading your thoughts. That's yeah, that's really creative. Thank you once again for taking the time to share your experience and perspective. Yeah, I appreciate it a lot and find it really interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you too for providing me with such opportunity to share about this rare disorder.
Absolutely.